Welcome to Conversations of Hope, a podcast that shines light into the darkness of childhood sexual abuse. I am your host, Faith Ingraham of Speaking Truth in Love Ministries.
And I am Michelle Viscuse from Journey Pink. We are both survivors of childhood sexual abuse, and we're sharing our healing journey to raise awareness and provide hope and support to other survivors.
We know what it's like to feel all alone with our secrets, but we also know what it's like to find freedom. We are breaking the silence that allows sexual abuse to thrive and using our voices to empower and encourage those who have experienced abuse.
Our goal is to create a safe space for survivors to find hope and healing in community. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, Michelle, it's finally underway, our first podcast session for our series, Conversations of Hope. And I want to talk a little bit today about our ministries and how we came to start Conversations of Hope. I'm Faith Ingraham from Speaking Truth in Love Ministries, which I co-founded with my husband in 2007. I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. My husband has been a pastor since 1983. And in 2006, my offender, who was my dad, molested my niece. And it was that event and how we needed to respond to that that kind of thrust us into the ministry of Speaking Truth in Love. The two goals of Speaking Truth in Love is to equip church leaders and lay people on how do we respond to abuse when it happens within our church, within our families, and how do we respond to survivors to help them and not hurt them, not re-victimize them, and how do we respond to offenders? How do we hold them accountable?
Right.
Because we love both the survivor and the offender, and God loves them both. But there are consequences, especially to criminal activities. So that's a little bit about Speaking Truth in Love. And you have a ministry as well, Michelle. Why don't you share that with us?
Yes, my ministry is called Journey Pink. I am also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and I was abused throughout my childhood, and I kept the secret. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my husband, and I kept that secret for 38 years. And when I finally hit rock bottom and went to see a counselor, I didn't know how to heal. I didn't know what to say. How do you say something when you have kept it in for so long? So the ministry Journey Pink, Pink stands for Princess in Need of a King. The reason I share my story and the reason I founded that ministry is so that people would know that healing is possible and that you can go from completely silent and isolated with your thoughts to being free and having a voice and helping others and empowering others with the same comfort and love that God has given you in your healing journey. And so that's the ministry Journey Pink. And I started it back in 2013 is when I started counseling. And I also started my blog then. And I was anonymous for a while. And then when I got my voice, I became public and used my name. And I've written my story and written a book. And so I'm just wanting other survivors out there to know that they do not have to keep those secrets and that shame does not belong to them. So that's the main goals of my ministry. But I'm also passionate, very passionate about helping churches understand that it's important to talk about abuse in church. It's important to share that message. It's important to provide hope, because when we avoid that topic, then the people in the congregation are left to make sense of that sermon in their circumstances. And I really, really struggled with that growing up as a child and even as a teenager and still as an adult. When there's, talk about sexual sin, I didn't know as a child what was happening to me was a crime. I thought I was participating in sexual sin. And so I thought God was mad at me. And so I think it's important that even talking about something like sexual sin, that we say that this isn't referring to sin that's committed against you or sin against your will or
Right.
sin that is a crime being committed against a child. I mean, I think it's really important to say things like that so that people know that God loves them and he does not wish for anyone to be abused and he doesn't take it lightly. So I think those are the things that we're missing sometimes in church. And I think it's important to say it.
Right. And I think a lot of times children are definitely vulnerable, but I've known survivors that were adult victims of sexual abuse
Yes.
because of the power and control, the difference of the person committing the sexual abuse of somebody that may be in their 20s,
Right.
but they're being abused by their pastor or their counselor or, somebody that they went to for help.
Yes.
So it's not just children who are vulnerable,
It's
it's
all of us.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's a power differential, it's if the more powerful person and you feel like if it's an employer or somebody that has power over you, it's almost like they're holding a gun to you because you feel like you have no choice. And yet, if you go to somebody and say, okay, this counselor sexually abused me, they said, well, why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you get out of that situation? And it's not that easy.
No, it's not.
It's and when you're in an abuse situation, there's flight, fight, freeze, and fawn are the main responses. Some of us freeze and because we don't know what to do, we don't know how to respond, and we're so shocked that this person that we trusted would violate that trust. And then we think it's our fault that we did the sinful thing that happened.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
sometimes, like as a child and it's a parent, you just feel like, I can't say no to this person because I've been taught from infancy, children obey your parents.
Right.
And the same thing with respected adults. You say, okay, I can't say no to this teacher. I can't say no to this pastor because we have been taught to obey and submit to people in authority. And we don't know what to do when they are asking us to do something that is wrong or immoral or sinful.
And I think that's the goal of a person who abuses their power to manipulate and abuse someone is they want you to feel like it's your shame because then you're not going to tell. Then you're going to be ashamed about what's happening. And, for people like us who've experienced sexual abuse, the chances of us being re-victimized and re-victimized and re-victimized, it just happens. It's a high probability, and it happens because, like you said, automatic responses where we freeze or fawn or flee or fight, like those may be one of our responses. But the other thing is we have lost our voice. So I didn't have a voice for a long time. And now I finally have my voice and I'm using it so that other people who have lost their voice can know that that voice is still inside of them and they can use it. But it's a process. So healing from sexual abuse it's a journey. It's a long journey. Like for me, it's been almost 11 years and I still feel like I'm healing and everything I'm learning, I'm sharing because I know what it's like to be alone with secrets. I know what it's like to feel like something's wrong with me. I know what it feels like to think that there must be something written on my forehead that makes people want to do this to me. Like something is wrong. And maybe God made me this way. Like that was another thing I thought. And when you just mentioned another verse, children obey your parents. Well, that's a dichotomy because how do I honor that scripture and obey my parents when it is a crime that's being committed, when abuse is happening? And so
Right.
that is why those conversations in church and taking care with those verses to know that it's really, really important. Their chances are, and you and I both know with statistics, the reality is people sitting in those pews have our story. They've experienced abuse somewhere,
Right.
somehow. And so I think we just need to be sensitive to that and promote an atmosphere of safety that promotes healing, not more
Right.
shame.
Right. And another thing when you're talking about that is that we need to teach our children the importance between secrets and surprises, that we do not keep secrets. We can keep surprises, and what the difference is between them. Secrets are things that somebody tells you to keep because they don't want to get in trouble or they don't want to be found out. And usually there's something that somebody needs to know.
Right.
A surprise is something that you're eventually going to tell. For instance, if you're going to give a birthday present to your brother or sister, and your mom says, we need to keep this a surprise until their birthday. And then that's a surprise. And eventually you're going to give that surprise to the person that it's intended for. And even if it's a surprise party, but it's not a secret. It's not going to be kept forever away from that person. You're going to surprise them later, but we need to tell our children that it's important that we don't keep secrets from each other, so that when somebody does say, this is our little secret, this is our secret game, and they can do things that are secret, that are innocent, like, oh, I gave you this candy bar, but we have to keep it secret from everybody else because everybody else would want one. So it starts out very innocent,
It
like,
does.
we can keep this little secret between you and I, and it doesn't seem like it's a bad secret. I had a candy bar.
Right.
But if you're keeping that secret, then the next time that they tell you to keep a secret, then you almost feel trapped. Okay, I kept this other secret from my mom and dad, and now they're asking me to keep this secret. And if I don't, then I'm going to be found out for every time that I did keep a secret. So
Right.
it's important that our children know what's the difference between secrets and what's the difference between that and a surprise, and why do we not keep secrets?
Right. Yeah, even when they're small, like you said, because those small secrets lead to big secrets. They start
Right.
small to groom you and to build you up to trust them and to think that you have to keep the secret. And so, even if it's a small secret, let's talk about it. Don't
Right.
sh- don't ho- don't hide it, because that's going to help us clue in that someone's asking you to keep secrets, which you should be asking you to do that.
Right. And there's so many for parents, there are so many books now that weren't available
Right.
even a few years ago that you can read with your children that talk about these difficult issues, about somebody giving you an uncomfortable feeling, and who should you go and tell, and talking to them about who are your safe people, who
Yes.
can you tell when somebody makes you feel uncomfortable, and safe touch and not safe touch and different things, because it's not stranger danger that we need to teach our children against, because over 90% of offenders are people that the child or the victim knows and trusts. They're in their family circle, they're in their church community, they're in their sports community. They're people that they know. And so if we just teach them about stranger danger, then they aren't going to be aware that even people that are close to you can violate that trust and can become dangerous people in our lives.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that we want to do with this podcast is use it to empower and encourage and strengthen survivors on their journey of healing, and also to provide information and equip people helpers such as family members, parents, pastors, coaches, different people that are working with children and survivors so that they know what they can do to help a survivor or a victim to find a safe place. If they're not already in a safe place, we want to get them in a safe place.
Yes.
And we are equipped, sometimes we need to involve law enforcement, child protection services, different things. We need to use the resources in our community and not just think that we can handle these situations all on our own,
Right.
when somebody does reveal that they're being abused.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's where talking about it is so important, because we don't talk about it. People don't know. They don't know that what you've described earlier is grooming. They don't have a picture of what it looks like to be severely manipulated and severely brainwashed to the point that you will not tell the secret because you are terrified of what's going to happen if you tell. And so people may think like, well, why didn't she say something? Or why didn't you come to me? And then those are comments that are hurtful sometimes because, then now you're feeling like it's your fault again because you didn't do something. And so I think these conversations, and the reason we want to talk about it in this podcast, is not only to help survivors and empower survivors to know that they can find healing, but also having these conversations is going to educate us as people, as families, as churches, to recognize abuse when it's happening, and also, like you said, to be better equipped to handle it and to respond and to say something when they see something. Because
Right.
it's hard to talk about. It's hard to look at. It's hard to face. And people don't want to talk about it in general. And so
Right.
we want to have a place where we can talk about it, have a conversation, and learn more about it. Because then, as parents, you can learn things to look for with your own children. I can't change what happened to me, but I do want to change it for my child. And I hope it's even better for their child, that we know even more, and that it's less and less and less. We want to stop it from happening. We want to prevent it from happening.
Right. Right. And I think even if we see something, we doubt ourselves. Like if we see something that we say, that's not right. They shouldn't be alone in that room. And we then say, I'm just thinking the worst and it's really nothing. And why am I thinking that way?
Right.
But because all of us have those feelings of doubt when we see something we're uncomfortable with, because we don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to accuse somebody. We don't want to make somebody feel bad. We then often will just let things go that we know they weren't right. They aren't right. And maybe it is innocent, but if you say something like, maybe somebody is going to be alone with a child, giving them a ride, and it's an innocent thing, but you say that doesn't look good. That's not, we need to do something different. I'll ride with you so that there's two adults and, that we're making sure that everyone is safe.
Yes.
Just saying that's not accusing them. It's just saying, we need to do something different so that we know we're providing safety for everyone involved. And just thinking about those things. And even though a lot of churches have safety policies, are they being followed? A policy that's not being followed is not an effective policy. So if you sidestep it and say, oh, okay, well, in this situation, we don't need to do it, but you need to follow it in every situation. And you need to be aware of why those policies are in place. it's for the organization's protection, it's for the volunteers' protection, it's for the children's protection, it's for everybody so that everybody can be safe and there won't be false accusations because all of these layers are in place to prevent that.
That's right. That's right. And just as we're talking now, this reminds me of the first conversation that we had when we first met. And so you're from the North, I'm from the South, and we were at a conference together. By chance, I signed up late, was invited to come out to that conference, and it was in September, I think. And I was
Okay.
introduced to you, and you and your husband and I went to lunch together. And it was in that conversation that we had a very similar talk to what we just had. Like, you were talking about it, I was talking about it, and this is what my ministry is about, and this is what I'm passionate about. And it was clear that it was a divine appointment. Like, we were on the same page in our heart and in our passion for stopping abuse and helping people who've been abused and showing people how to prevent abuse. And so we leave the conference, and one of the things that happened at the conference was I mentioned to you guys about a podcast that I listened to. It was The Ugly Truth About the Girl Next Door. And I said, have you listened to that podcast? And Dale had actually, your husband, had actually been interviewed on that podcast. And so he said, yeah, I've actually been interviewed on that podcast. And I was like, oh, wait, you're Dale Ingraham, the Dale Ingraham? And I showed him on my phone where I had shared that podcast with my husband. And I said, check this out. Please listen. This is a pastor that actually gets it. And he says it like it is. You've got to listen to this podcast. And I also sent it to a friend. So then, even more, I'm thinking, like, God, you have really set this up for us to meet and to share our hearts with each other. And I'd already listened to that podcast of his interview months in advance. And so we come back home and life goes on. We're doing our own thing. And then you can share what happened to get to this point.
So I had started Conversations of Hope as a video project several years ago, and we actually did several recording sessions with several ladies, and we were sharing the stories and different things about our healing journeys. But the sound quality on all of the videos was such that they couldn't be used because the sound quality has to be really good. That's the most important thing. So we kind of had to put that on the back burner, and God was saying, well, let's just do Conversations of Hope in a different format as a podcast. And I was getting ready to start the podcast series, and I thought I should have a co-host. And eventually we're going to be interviewing different survivors and talking to them about their stories and their healing journeys. But I figured if we had a co-host, then we can bounce things off from each other. It's easier to listen to two people talking about something in a conversation rather than to listen to one person giving a lecture type thing.
Right.
So I called you because God brought your name to my mind as a potential co host. And I called you and you said, oh, yes, I've been wanting to start a podcast of my own, but I haven't had the chance to do it. And so you jumped at the opportunity. And I'm so glad that we're finally now getting together and we're going to do this podcast series called Conversations of Hope because we do want to bring hope to survivors and to people helpers and to whoever listens. We want to bring hope for the situations and circumstances that they are facing.
Right, right. And we've made a bullet list of all the things that we want to talk about. And it's hard to believe, but there's a lot to talk about when it comes to sexual abuse. There's so many twists and turns that we could take. And so we're going to take them. We're going to go on this journey. We're starting now. And this is our intro. But I hope you will join us again because we have other topics coming up. I think our next topic is sharing your story and how we get to that point. And so if you will join us, we will be looking forward to having you along for this adventure. Thank you for being here.
We hope this podcast is a source of comfort and inspiration for those who are struggling with the aftermath of childhood sexual abuse. Thank you for joining us on this journey of hope and healing.
Please be sure to subscribe and check out our show notes for more information. See you next time on Conversations of Hope with Faith and Michelle.